running the taping and the operations tonight. Let us know if we're starting soon. As soon as that's soon, we can have all the old supervisors rear-end. And we are on. So I want to welcome everybody tonight to the May 25th, 2023 Webster Town Board Workshop. Bit of a unique one tonight. The 3.5 years that I have been the supervisor, we've had plenty of workshop PowerPoint presentations done by department heads of the town, like Paul Adams, and also by outside agencies who have come in to show us things. To the best of my knowledge, we've never had one of the town board members be the presenter at a workshop, and certainly not the town supervisor. But based on the topic of tonight's conversation, presentation, we went around and decided it was best that I present this. So, Karen, I see you have my face on the screen. I don't know if you want to get the PowerPoint on the screen. Yeah, because I don't think people watching this later want to see my face. So let's see if I can follow the technical instructions correctly. So, first of all, I want to make sure everybody understands a town board workshop, by definition, is really for presentations, and then the town board will ask the presenter or other people on the dais questions. These 25 slides that we're about to show are going to be posted up on the town website, and they're also going to be posted next to Nequal's presentation from July 28th, 2022, so people can kind of juxtaposition both to see how they match up or whatever. Between now and June 30th, because we are somewhat targeting June 30th as the date that the town board here will have to make a decision on what short-term options for EMS in Webster we would go through. I'm keeping it very open to what type of public interaction venue form there would be. And I'm not adverse at all to a special meeting that is so the public can come in and ask questions and get more information, because it might be very helpful in having the town board discern and decide by June 30th what is the best option. So I want to lead off with that. So I call this kind of our mission statement. Why are we here tonight? Well, I don't think anybody would deny that the current EMS model is not sustainable. I think that Nequal's has been very vocal about that. I think every other EMS agency in Monroe County has talked about that. We purposely, in this presentation, didn't want to get into the details of federal, state, Medicare, Medicaid, transport, non-transport, private insurance. I could go on and on and on. It's a confusing enough subject to begin with. Your eyes would roll back in your head if I got into that tonight. But the one thing about this, and I said here in this statement that the town board has a responsibility to do what's in the best interest of the citizens and taxpayers. And you can see it there. I won't read the rest of those bullet points. I've written this in articles. I've been stated saying this, and I truly believe in this. We need to figure out what is the best EMS scenario for a 35 square mile, 45,000 citizen, socioeconomic town of Webster. And that model may be very different from a 100 square mile, 20,000 citizen, different socioeconomic model. All right, Karen, let's see if I follow instructions correctly. So along the lines of what brought us here today, recent history, I'll let you look at this. I'm not going to read it off, but it's essentially a timeline that covers the last 18 months. In November of 2021, the town board awarded, through its municipal certificate of need, the whole town of Webster, all 35 square miles, to Nequal's. And that was upon West Webster Fire District
having elected to exit the ambulance business. That exit of the ambulance business is one that many fire departments have done over the last 30 years. In fact, I think they're one of the last of the fire departments still, or were at that time, still in the ambulance business. So in January of 2022, Neatwalls, through a contract with the town, was handling the whole town. That resulted in 2022 of an additional $550,000 of basic life support ambulance fees that flew in through WEMS, which WEMS is Webster, the town. We'll get to. So that's an up, and that's a great. That was a thumbs up for Neatwalls as an organization. Now, Neatwalls had previously had a $300,000 contract with West Webster Fire to handle their BLS ambulance, so they lost that revenue in 2022. So simple math, they increased their revenue by $550,000. They lost $300,000. The net was about $250,000. And that's what we kind of knew would happen. It was part of the decision making for the town. So within that 18 months, Neatwalls also applied for and was granted a $205,000 ARPA grant from the town on July 7th. And then on July 28th, they came in 3 weeks later and said we need an $800,000 tax district, and we need it as early as January of 23. And that's what really started the next 9 months, the due diligence process. The town board said, okay, that's a lot of money to be asking off of our taxpayers. We need to really kind of gather some documents, reports, and whatever so we can make an informed decision. All right. So the next screenshot is a little history on Neatwalls. And I'll let you look at this because I find that when you're a historian of businesses, and Neatwalls is a business, that sometimes the best way to determine why a company is structured and operating today in 2023 the way it does is to look back at how they were born, why they were born. And this slide shows that they were born 35 years ago really out of necessity. Smart. Fire departments are doing the basic ambulance transports to the hospital, but the fire departments didn't have the paramedics, the more trained EMTs. I don't know if I can. And so Neatwalls, and at the time actually Southeast Quadrant Advanced Life, Sequalls came about around that time. Sequalls is no longer in existence. But interesting. Now, one of the most confusing things, and again, Paul Adams, you're sitting over there, and you've helped in this due diligence. I think you almost in the last week had a V8 moment. Well, not so much you, but some of the other people that, oh, so WEMS, Webster Emergency Medical Services, is the town of Webster. And as this screen shows, it's unique. Webster is unique to the other towns in Monroe County. We are the only town of 19 towns that has a municipal-owned certificate of need. Now, when the town owns this certificate of need, oops, I went too far, Karen. Let's see if I can go back now. I can. Oh, I'm learning the internet. Well, with anything, when you own it, you got powers and you got liabilities. No free lunch. So the power of the municipal con really is summed up in those 2 bullet points you see there. And I think this is the first time you see this in the presentation. the town outsources its municipal its authority, its ability to handle BLS, ambulance, licensure, transport. We outsource that within a 5-year contract right now with Nequals. Now, that's the powers, or a summary of the powers. Let's talk about the liabilities associated with a town-owned certificate of need. The best way to really, I can get theoretical on this, but as you look at that screenshot, I know it's been very newsworthy lately, and there's been a lot of stuff out there, social media, the TV news, whatever. There's been incidents that have happened lately that unequivocally, irrefutably, the town would be liable. If something happened that was an injury, an accident, and or negligence that was caused by our outsourced ambulance company, Nequals, we can't abdicate our responsibility and liability as the town within that.
I'm sorry.
And I think that's very important. I'm going to go back to what I said before. I'm always the buzzkill. A workshop is a presentation, and it is not a public interaction. The public can come. There will be time and a venue and a forum for public interaction in the future on this. Now, the town has an ALS contract with Nequals, Advanced Life Support. These have historically been 1-year contracts. There has not been one that has been executed since 2021. We are operating in good faith under the 2021 contract. And within that contract, the 2021 referenced a $50,000 payment from the town's general fund budget to Nequals. Now, I'm going to try to avoid the confusion, because you're like, ALS contract. I'm about to go to the next page, BLS contract. In layman terms, the ALS contract of the town, these are the fly cars in many ways that you see in town. They're more like Broncos or whatever. And this is what the paramedics drive in. And they will take that fly car to the site of the incident should the call need a paramedic, advanced life support. Now, the BLS contract, and I think this is a very important thing, but I want to make sure I get all of these on here at the same time. And especially the last bullet point here. The town is WEMS. The money from the billing of the basic life support function of ambulance in Webster is deposited into the town's bank accounts. And then it is remitted back to Nequals per our 5-year contract with them for them to handle the basic life support. Now, on the previous page I said ALS. And I said it had something to do with those fly cars. Well, it's not always that Nequals has a fly car, because on their WEMS ambulances, more the box ambulances, it's not, they could have an EMT driving it, and they could have a paramedic in the passenger seat. They could do that. In fact, all the other agencies, for the most part, are structured that way. But the WEMS part of it is when you see the box ambulances with Webster Emergency Medical Services. And that's the town. The town outsourcing it to Nequals. Let's see, we are a town-based ambulance funding. So there's been a lot of talk lately about, how is the town of Webster supported ambulance in Webster. And support is a funny thing, you know, rah-rah support, or let's just go to tangible, financial support. So this screenshot gets into more details about how we were very excited in many ways to award the whole town to Nequals in 2022 because we had a feeling that it would create more revenue net profit to them. And it did. We got $550,000 more WEMS revenue. And like I said, they did lose a $300,000 lease staffing contract with West Webster, but the net is $250,000. And then also in 2022, as it says here, we did award Nequals a $204,000 ARPA grant, and they got $50,000 through their normal. So, being honest, we were a bit surprised in July of 2022 after all of that, that they were asking for an $800,000 tax district as soon as 2023. Now, at this podium last week, one of Nequals' board members of 11 years, George Glasgow, he stood here at the podium making a public statement. In fact, Ahmed, you said he was blessed to do that, if you want to call it that. Right, Charlie? I mean, there's some attorney stuff going on, but that's fine. And George Glasgow said, you go back to the tape, the reason why Penfield Volunteer Ambulance has nicer ambulances than the WEMS ambulances is the town of Penfield has supported Penfield Ambulance financially better than the town of Webster has historically. That was the statement. That's the last 6 years of Penfield, Arundequoit, and Webster. And Webster has gotten $605,000 from town governments. I don't know what they've gotten from the county. I don't know what they've gotten from the state. I don't know any of that other stuff. But when I matched up and corroborating this with the benchmark towns of Arundequoit and Penfield, those are the accurate numbers the last 6 years. So the last 9 months of due diligence, because as I said before, for the town board to make an educated decision on any monies, additional monies, that aren't called for in our 5-year contract. There is no monies in the 5-year contract called for. Within our due diligence, we were able to find out that approximately 33% of the total hours of EMTs and paramedics at Nequals in 2022 were contractually obligated in 2 lease staffing contracts outside of Webster, in fact outside of Monroe County, to, I'm not sure, towns or fire departments in Wayne and Ontario County. I'm not privy to whether those towns, whether Nequals has asked for money in a tax district for them. I don't know that. I just know that Webster, taxpayers and town board are being asked to fund Nequals. But at least in 2022, it appears 33% of their boots on the ground EMTs and paramedics were deployed contractually outside of Webster. Now, being fair, one of the leases ceased in February of 23, so there's only one of those contracts still in place that deploy 10,000 hours a year. All right, let's see. Why can't I get that to move? I did. All right. Now, this is an excerpt call volume comparison in 2021 that was from Nequals' July 28, 2022 PowerPoint presentation that they did right here that started this due diligence when they asked for the $800,000. And as you can see, what this shows, and certainly when we post the PowerPoint tonight, I said we're going to put right next to it the PowerPoint from last year that Nequals did, so you can go and see with your own eyes the two. Webster shows on this as being pretty much equal call volume in 21 to Gates, Penfield, and Parrington. A little ahead of it. They got 6,500 calls for Webster. Gates, Penfield, and Parrington are in the 5,800 to 5,200. So Webster's a little bit higher volume on calls, per that report. Now, in our last 9 months due diligence, I went out and asked the benchmark agencies, chiefs, for their call volume. This next screen is the 3-month aggregate of calls between October and December 2022 for Irondequoit Volunteer Ambulance, Gates, Penfield, Parrington, and Webster. What you're going to notice here is that first of all, Irondequoit wasn't on the previous page as a benchmark town. But as I said previous, Gates, Penfield, and Parrington was. Now remember I said that Webster showed as being higher call volume slightly annually than Gates, Penfield, and Parrington. Well, as you can see from this, at least for those 3 months, Webster was a lot less. And the reason is pretty simple. This is a reporting of WEMS calls, basic life support calls. Now, 70% approximately of WEMS calls necessitate a paramedic coming in on a fly car. And that 70% of these 1,100 calls, another about 700 calls to the fly car, would actually be reported as 1,872 calls. And that's how you compare against the other towns. But the problem is, the other towns just count the call once. They count a BLS only call as 1. They count a BLS call that needs ALS as 1. So I think it's important to make an apples to apples comparison on that, because a lot of times metric wise, when you're trying to figure out, well, this is how many calls you have, this is how much money you have. Well, if your calls are half, it's not the only metric, maybe the money you need is half. Maybe not. Now, along these lines of benchmarking, we also put together 6 months of Penfield Volunteer Ambulance and Webster. The October 2022 to March of 2023 timeframe. Law of statistics, the bigger the sample, you get rid of anomalies, crazy months, stuff like that. What you have here is that Penfield, in that 6-month period, handled 3,870 calls, and WEMS handled 2,358. Now, this is where I'm going to introduce the concept of mutual aid. And the way I understand mutual aid is pretty simple. I'll make it simple as I can for everybody if they've never heard of it before. No ambulance company can handle every call in their district. If you get 24 ambulance calls a day, you don't get the ability to have them, well, I'll get one call at 1 o'clock, I'll get one call at 2 o'clock. When emergencies happen, they happen. So if 4 calls come in to WEMS in a 1-hour period and they have 3 rigs up, they need help. And that's mutual aid. That's where another town comes in to fill in for them. And mutual aid is supposed to be a net sum zero game. You help me, I'll help you. When the months pay out after 2, 3, 4, 5 months, usually like-sized agencies will have the same amount of mutual aid calls they did out as the other one did coming in. And this is interesting because Penfield did 1,012 mutual aid calls out to other towns in that 6-month period, and Webster did 148. Now down at the bottom, this is how many calls were needed in to Webster. Into Penfield in that 6-month period was 113. Into Webster was 276. So, I'm going to call this, as we get into the short-term and long-term options that we've produced up to this point from this 9-month due diligence, I hope when you go back and look at this, people remember I said this term. I present these without prejudice. These are the options. They just are the options. Where we go with them, it depends. So here, and it says here, we're going to make this decision, and it's a town board decision. They're going to have a short-term option on this that's referendum town-wide vote. This is a summary of the short-term options, and they're in 3 categories. We have the town proposed options, and there's 4 of them. We have the Nequals proposed options, because we did interact with Nequals during this process, so they could have a bite at the apple of giving some ideas on how we could remedy this. And then we have 1 contingency option. So that's a summary of it. This is more breakdown of each of those options. Of the town proposed short-term options, 1 is no change. There's no additional funding that's given to Nequals in 2023, and no change to the contract. The contract doesn't call for any money. It is an option. Contractually, the town is not obligated to give any money. There could be additional funding with no contract changes. In the next 35 days, the town would have to, town board, hopefully with the help of the public and whatever, is that something they want to do? Do they want to give more money from the general fund, budget amendment, budget transfer in 2023 and maybe into 2024 with no change to the contract, no change to organizational operational structure of Nequals? Next option was actually proposed by one of our town board members, was $20,000 a month going from May 1st, 2023 to April 30th, 2024, aggregate of $240,000, with performance measures that would need to be established with monthly oversight. I don't think at this point there has been an elaboration and a layout of those metrics. And the 4th one is, let me make sure I got this correct. The town, this is a town option, the town would provide money to Nequals in parallel with Nequals developing, their leadership, their board, their leadership developing a formal plan for change of leadership, change of fly car core model, and change of organizational and/or operational structure. The next category of options, short term, is what Nequals presented to the town based on a board resolution of Nequals that was done at their Wednesday, May 10th Nequals board meeting. And they gave us 2 options. And here they are. They're both they're both $40,000 to $45,000 a month. One of them runs through the end of this calendar year, one runs through April of next year, and both are without any change to the contract, organizational structure. In fact, the second one says, this was right off of the resolution, all right, that, what does it say, structure, or no change to structure or leadership, and a negotiated amount thereafter for the remainder of the contract, which runs through 12/31/25. So I think that option means that we need that money, $480,000 through April of 24, and then we need to figure out, you need to negotiate with us, town, more money from May of 24 through the end of 25, for those last 20 months. Now, the next one is the contingency option. And before I put it on the screen, I'm well aware that this is going to elicit a lot of hisses and emotional and visceral, and I get that. But I want to make it clear that the town board has a responsibility. We have a responsibility to proactively be ready for anything. And if we're not ready for anything and we're reactive, then we're not doing our job. So as you look at this, whatever your reaction is to it, understand that we need to be ready. So I don't think I have to read that one off. That will be out on the website within the next hour. People will watch this tape on channel 1303. It's out there. And how that option becomes, if it gets any legs in the next 35 days, I don't know. But it is an option. Now, long-term options. Here is a summary of the long-term options. And as we see it right now, there's 6. And I love number 6 because one of the benefits of long-term is that we don't have to decide by June 30th like the short-term options. So we have some latitude. And I also want to make sure that that footnote, even though it's small, is in there, is that where the short-term options are somewhat mutually exclusive, they are. The long-term options aren't. You could have an RFP for a request for proposal for ALS and BLS and do an ambulance tax district. You can do both. You could have an EMS consolidation of these private agencies and a tax district. You can do them both. So, the proposed long-term options, as we see them now, similar to, just continue with the current 5-year contract that expires 12/31/25. Town would reevaluate options for 26 prior to the contract expiration. We're in a contract. So we're under no obligation as the town to give any more funding or anything, so it's an option. I guess long-term till the end of 25. We own the certificate of need. We are the only town in Monroe County that has it. We outsource ambulance right now to need quals. We as the town and the government could, and I see my predecessor shaking his head, yes, you know this, Ron, right? We could create an ambulance department in the town. They'd be town employees, wages, pension, and benefits. The town could own or lease the ambulances and, lease bases or staging points. But I also want everybody to know that that last bullet point is one that really resonates with me. We're still fully liable, just like we are now, for the actions or lack thereof, if we do that. The next one is we put out a request for proposal. We test the competitive market for EMS providers, exercise the municipal town-owned CON to issue a request and see what NEQUALs and other agencies come up with as how to operate in this 35 square mile, 45,000 citizen socioeconomic town. The next one is EMS consolidate. Oh, I'm sorry. Ambulance district is the next one. Now, the ambulance district is one that we know the NEQUAL's leadership is in favor of. They originally proposed it in the July 28, 2022 presentation. And as it says here, in 2022, 9 out of 19 towns in Monroe County had an ambulance district, and the funding from property taxes in those towns ranged from $150,000 to $950,000. Sorry about that. I gotta get this clicker better. Next option. EMS consolidation. Now, there's not a lot of verbiage there because I want this to be crystal clear. A merger consolidation of current EMS agencies to gain economies of scale. The town can't force private EMS agencies to merge. NEQUAL is a 501c3 non-for-profit. AMR and Monroe are for-profit. Penfield Volunteers are not. Those are private companies. Town can't come in and make them sit at the table and say, hey, you do 8,000 calls a year and I do 6,000 calls. If we merged and did 14,000 and got rid of some, fluff at the top of management, maybe there's some economies of scale, and God helps those who help themselves financially. We can't force that as the town. Other, the one that I love, public input is welcome. The town will consider all successful models. Somebody says, hey, down in St. Petersburg, Florida, they do this. I want to hear about it. Right? Knowledge is power. I'd like to know, and I think the town board would like to know. Now, the preliminary next steps toward a long-term solution. Pretty excited about this one. U of R Simon School, one of the best MBA programs in the country, does a program each year where they take these pods of 3 to 5 MBA candidates, and they will do a project where they go in and analyze a business. And then at the end of the semester, from that analyzing and questioning and all that, they give a report on what they think could be improved. And I reached out to them when I heard about this, and I said, I know this is interesting. We're the government, but we own this con. We are in the ambulance business. Would you consider doing that as a project for autumn semester of 2023? Long story short, bunch of meetings, Zooms, this and that. They're going to do it. And I think, you're glad to love the price, free, and we got really talented people that are going to look at this. Sometimes having an outsider look at things gives a perspective that the insiders never thought of. So I'm really excited about that. And this was one of our town board members' suggestions, that the town will consider hiring a paid consultant to do an analysis of the town-owned certificate of need and long-term options. Selfishly, I like the free one better, but I'm not adverse to the paid consultant. Okay, well, you guys have heard my lips flapping long enough, because we are at, I don't know, 35 minutes, so we're tying this up. Why are we here? I come back to the mission statement at the beginning. It's the same thing we saw at the beginning, so I'm going to end with this. I've talked with all the board members about how serious of a decision this is, and how it's incumbent on them, all of them, that they really dive into the facts and the data. It's a very emotional, it's a very political issue. It's incumbent on the town board over the next 35 days to try to sift through what is political, what is emotional, and go with facts, so that we start moving toward the best ambulance structure in the town of Webster for today and the next 20 years. And with that, I am going to get off the podium, because as workshops go, the town board now can ask questions, and those questions maybe will be handled by Paul Adams, who led the due diligence, or Charlie Genesi, who is the legal, or anybody else on the town board that feels comfortable answering a question. So I'm going to go back to my seat. And I'm actually going to hand out to the town board members a copy of that 28-page slide deck that we just did. So it might help guide them into questions. I'll be honest with everybody, I did not want to hand it out to the board members at the beginning, because I know how I am. I would be going ahead, and as you're going ahead to page 9, you're really not paying attention to the speaker talking about page 2. So, John, Jenny, oh, Charlie, I didn't get one for you, Paul. So, sure.
Because I made some notes on your presentation. First, I want to let everybody in the audience know, I know there were a couple people who wanted to ask questions, and I know this is a frustrating meeting where we're giving you a lot of information, but you don't get to speak. So I would really encourage you to write down those questions, send them in to us, come to whatever meeting we're going to do next. But please, we want to hear from you. So don't be afraid to contact us, call us, send in emails, so that we can look at those questions and hopefully get you some answers. And again, I'm sorry, we're just not taking questions from the audience. I actually wrote down that I had some questions, but as I look at them, they're probably more my own personal comments. And one is that if there's a tax district that is voted on and formed, I would hope that there would be some metrics to ensure that we only subsidize, if you will, calls that are within the town, because those are town taxpayers that are paying for that. So I don't, and I know other towns have done that, that they give so much per call. Also, if we look at the additional funds that have been requested of us, for the 6 months, we're looking at $270,000, and I want everyone to be sure that when the supervisor said budget amendments, that's because this is not something that we included in our budget for this year. So should we do that, then those funds are going to come away from something else that we budgeted for. And the thing that really hit me on this is no matter what the solution is, whether short or long term, because we own the certificate of need, we always carry the liability. And that's the end of my comments.
I'll respond to what you said about the extent that the taxing district, it would be only the town, and that love the town. So if that we created an ambulance district, we would only be serving the town.
Oh, I understand that, but so that would be written into such metrics of a district where it's only reimbursement for those calls within the town. Yes.
And Patty, I will say this, and believe me, that was a Reader's Digest presentation on the file this thick on EMS. In there's 9 towns currently with tax districts. They range from $150,000 to about $950,000. They also range from the way that the government set them up. Some just went with we're just using as a point of reference, 20 cents per thousand. And 20 cents per thousand of assessed value on your property equals this amount of money for your house, and then that adds up to $600,000 to the ambulance. Other towns used a very metric-driven, and I'll admit, I loved what Henrietta did. They have 9 metrics that you know where the money's going. You know where the money's going. The ones that just kind of plug a 20 cents per thousand and say, just give us the money, we don't know where the money's going. I mean, we can assume we know where the money's going, but you really, it's not accounted for in monthly, quarterly reports. So.
And if a tax district is established, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, what the town board would establish exactly what that tax rate would be. Is that correct or no?
Yes.
You have a question?
Well, wait, the district would be the town.
Yeah. Right. And the other question, I'll have to go back and read the existing contracts that we have, or the existing one. But I thought I had read in there that that contract indemnifies the town. I don't know if you recall that or not, but I'll take a deep dive into that. I just want to point out this is the first time I'm seeing this presentation, and I wish I had had a copy before the presentation was done, because I like to take notes as I'm going, so I'll be doing further, I don't want to say investigation, but I'm just going to take a deeper dive into this presentation post this meeting, so I may have additional questions down the road. I had to go outside and meet my son, so I missed part of this presentation regarding the contingency option. And I know that Penfield's been brought up more than once by town supervisor. So, and Paul, first of all and foremost, I want to thank you and your entire department for literally the hundreds of hours that you have put into this due diligence process. I mean, it's been a very, very arduous job that you've done, and it's greatly appreciated. And I know that you've done this for Webster campus, and I know that Penfield has been brought up as a potential option here. So, and I don't need to put you on the spot here, and I apologize, and I'm going to ask you a few questions. with respect to Penfield, okay? Have you done the same due diligence for Penfield Volunteer Ambulance? Seeing as how that they've been listed as an option here? Okay.
We can't hear you.
So, along with the financial analysis, we also did some, call volume analysis as well. So have you done any call volume analysis for Penfield either?
I have not, but Tom actually headed up that portion of the due diligence examination.
Okay. Well, hopefully I can get some additional statistics from town supervisor regarding all the statistics he may have been provided by Penfield Ambulance, because I really not today.
And John, and I appreciate, I want to make sure, and the town board, I think, I try to over-communicate with the town board. The 6 months and 3 months and statistics I put up there are called by, the town board has seen those.
Okay.
They have seen those.
I'd still be interested in seeing the 3 years.
I did,
Well, the finances,
Yeah.
that's different from the call volume.
Right.
The call volume, the 2 screenshots of 3-month and 6-month benchmark call volume, the town board has seen those over the last several months.
I did take a look at, I actually requested the billing information. Nichols uses a third-party biller, and that included not only the revenue, the amounts billed, and then amounts collected, but it also included some call volume. So I did see call volume that was tied into the billing records.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it once again.
And there was, John, you had asked a question earlier, I think to Charlie, legally, does the town board set the tax rate on the tax district? Well, go back to what I said earlier, there's 2 ways to come to get to the dollars you need in the tax district. One is kind of starting from, let's grab 20 cents per assessed value and do the math, and that equals 500,000. That's one way to come to it. The other is saying, here are the metrics that we want to build. And then as you start to figure out the metrics, the non-transport calls and how much we'll subsidize for that, the Medicare and Medicaid that don't get enough money really to cover the staff and all that. When you start to build those metrics, you add them all up and you're like, oh, that's the dollars spread over the assessment. That's how you come up with the tax rate per thousand. I like that way better than starting with, hey, let's look at 20 cents a thousand. Let's look at 25 cents a thousand. That just seems like a number pulled out of the air. Metric building is right sizing and getting the money where it's accountable and fiscally, that's what this board is hired to do.
I want to take a deeper look at all of this before I make any comment. I do know that the current situation is not good financially. Nichols is in serious financial difficulty, making this a difficult decision for us. They've thrown some numbers at us. I don't know what they base it on, because they don't tell us. I think we need that information as well before we can make a decision. That's between our attorneys. So that's for that information. Well, the question is that, they gave us 2 numbers, and they don't give us any background as to why they think those are the numbers they need. We need to add that information if we're going to make a,
That's obviously
and we don't have that.
a decision for the town board.
Yeah, I want to go back and look at the presentation that was made regarding 800K to see, was that a specific ask or was it used for illustrative purposes? But at the end of the day, whether it was specific ask or illustrative, the decision would be provided by the town at the end of the day. So, and with respect to your comment on metrics, I have absolutely no problem with that. I know that when we were discussing modifying the contract months and months ago, that's one of the areas that I wanted to include in a newer, modified or new contract was to have some measured metrics in there. I think it's important. That's my opinion.
Jenny?
It's not to what I'm saying. Like the mayor said, I need to look, more in depth to this. But Charlie, could we put this into referendum and have the town of Webster, vote on it?
I'd have to look at that. It may be subject to referendum. The thing is, we're creating an ambulance district, you're dealing with, especially because we have a county, we're dealing with about 4 different kinds of laws. We're dealing with general municipal law, town law, public health law. So I gotta research that.
It's a long-term option.
Yeah, of doing.
Ambulance district, referendum, townwide vote. I had set up there, and I appreciate it, through a lot of people. There's not gonna be a referendum on the short-term option. This is the fact. There's not gonna be a townwide.
Long-term option. I think.
Long-term option is in there, is that, that there could be a townwide vote.
Right.
And to be fair to the town citizens, you would have to show them, what are they voting on, as far as this dollars? Where is this dollars going?
Right.
And is it just going into an abyss at 20 cents per thousand, or is it going toward 9 metrics for $1,000 to put an ambulance at a high school football game? A certain amount of dollars for Medicaid and Medicare calls, which are underfunded right now. Nobody's denying that EMS is a problematic industry. I'm not denying it. I just want to make sure that the town of Webster, which we were hired as, doesn't, carry the burden unjustifiably on that.
One of the things we have to look at too is the question of whether there's going to be a taxing district or not. You can actually have an ambulance district without being a taxing district. People paid based on services received.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what the
I guess that would be
considering.
another long-term. I will say this, I think, and I'm gonna echo what Patty said, and I get it. It's probably frustrating for the people in the audience tonight that want to say something or ask questions. And I hope this isn't too anecdotally simplified. We all hear that sometimes you gotta just take 24 hours before you return that email. I think it's important for everybody to read and absorb, make some notes on that 28-page slide deck. Read and absorb the July 28th slide deck that's 15 slides that Nequals gave. Paradoxically, whatever you want to say, compare, contrast. And I will say this, and this is one thing I think we need to focus as a town board and as a community right now on the short-term option. Because we can sit here and talk about tax districts and referendums and this and that, but the reality is that by June 30th, we need to make a decision on the short-term option. There will be time after that to dedicate to the long-term option. And that's why I said, and I'm very open-minded to this one, and I'd like to give, it might not be tonight from the board, but what is the next step between now and June 30th? Do we do a special public forum where the public gets to, ask questions from the podium? Do we get a panel of Jeremy Cushman and different people from Monroe County and the state so that the people answering the questions aren't elected officials, but actually people that are in the industry? I'm open to anything on that so that we, as a town board, can make an informed, educated decision, and one that is, look, we're not going to please the whole public on this, but at least I'd like to look them in the eye and say, we didn't lazy this thing. We tried to do our due diligence. We tried to, work with the public, look at it from every angle. Give the public a chance to have a forum. It would not have been appropriate to have that forum tonight. I think people need to go back, look at it, read it, and then I'm all ears to the town board. Because I don't know if it's as simple as, well, let's have on June 1st, the 5 minutes open to the public, people come into the town board and talk about it. Let's have that on June 15th.
Well, quite frankly, I think that, the next board meeting is going to be they will have the option to ask questions because we give them the form to do that. So, I'm not against setting up a special meeting to,
Why don't we have
have
June 8th
questions.
workshop, instead of it being a workshop per se, allow the public to come in and ask questions and get answers?
Man, are we gonna miss you on the board?
The only-
I'm good with that.
I'm fine with that too. The only thing I want to say is, it's important for everyone to know that with the due diligence process, and if you look at the slides, we're trying to make a fact-based decision here on what's right for everyone in the town. And on June 8th, I appreciate all of your questions because I know that there are many, and especially the woman in the second row who's had her hand raised since the very beginning. Again, I apologize.
Just
But-
want to say
but-
something. Can I just say something?
I'm sorry.
Questions and discussion.
You know what,
So
and I'm gonna be the buzzkill on this, you know what?
This is
I'm
supposed
sorry,
to be
Betty, I'm gonna be the buzz.
short.
You
Why
cannot,
why
because
you
once
have
you
to-
say something, then why doesn't every single other person in this room say something?
Let us do it.
Okay.
We'll let you-
Let's do it, let's do it, let's do it.
What I would like to,
Answer our question.
Okay,
we will on June 8th.
No, now, June 8th.
June 8th is our workshop on June
Yes.
first.
We had stuff
Bill,
on a board that we
it
couldn't
is
even
done.
read.
does anybody else have any questions or comments at this point?
I'll have additional comments.
You
I
can,
never got a
yes.
chance to finish. What I'd like to hear on June 8th are questions. We will try to get you answers. What I don't want to hear is emotion.
No,
Because
it's
this is a
emotion.
very emotional decision for everyone in the community, but I want everyone to realize what the facts are.
When you're talking
Just gonna
about
say that.
people's
only other
lives,
thing
it's
that
I understand
very
that.
emotional.
The only other thing I'd like to point out is something that I think it was Patty, you had mentioned this, and I'm sure Supervisor did, was between now and June 8th, because there may be a lot of technical questions, and we obviously are not in the EMS world,
No,
but if you can
it's not.
send in your questions via email, we can get with the appropriate professionals to get you the correct answers. So I just wanted to reiterate that point, just please email questions.
Can't you just give us a few, can't you just give us like 10 minutes of questions?
So, has anybody else got anything?
No.
Well, everybody, I want to thank everybody for showing up, and it sounds like in 2 weeks, I don't know if the forum or the venue will be this town boardroom, because we've got to gauge if there's going to be a lot more interest from the public coming in. We might have to go to a bigger venue. I'm sure we'll have a portal for questions, because John, I couldn't agree with you more. Having questions come in ahead of time gives us a chance to go out to professionals. And
No, it
believe
gives you
me,
time to
you
make
would rather have
excuses.
professionals from Monroe County, the Department of Health answer these questions than elected officials who this is in our bailiwick. So the
Answer
more
the
you can ask those
question.
questions up front, the better. So, are we done for the
I
night?
think we're done.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate you all coming.
What's his solution? Yeah, it's right, but how are We do too. He won't. Yeah. Throw it all over. Town.